meeting, a budget meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I will take a motion to go into an open session of the budget committee from the board, Mrs. Nardolillo, and a second, Mr. Vondell. All in favor? Thank you. I will mention again that Mrs. Nardolillo and Mr. Vondell are our budget co-chairs, and I will, Mr. Kaur, do you want to begin tonight?
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. I'd be glad to. Could we go to the screen share, please? Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us here for the meeting. I think we still have some people coming in, so I'll just take care of that. Okay, thank you. All right, so tonight, obviously we start off with our mission statement, and we'll go to that. And I think, what I would hope is that in our budget presentation, in our new programs and our staffing, you can see that they are very, very closely aligned to our mission, and that is the lens through which we form our budget. Shaker Middle School, the innovation spaces, and then staffing associated with Shaker Middle School. I am so excited about the presentation for our innovation spaces. I think you will see ideas coming forward here that will truly make the experience of our middle school students so important, so different, and exciting. We're going to talk about staffing for the middle school, any additional staffing requests, and then we will talk about a new idea for getting substitutes to serve in our buildings when they are needed. So let's go to the first slide, please. And again, our mission focus here. So again, when we look at this, and I want to come back to the mission again tonight and don't want to just gloss over it, but when we look at that, all students are provided the opportunity and necessary support to engage in relevant, challenging work, which contributes to their academic and social growth and development. And I can't think of a night where this has, where this is more important. When we looked at last week on our presentation on Wednesday, we looked at the importance of mental health and social emotional well-being. And tonight, we are going to talk about engagement. We're talking about challenging work, relevant work, and how that work contributes to the growth of the entire child. So very much looking forward to that, very, very mission aligned and focused in terms of where we're headed. The second part of this talks again about the people who serve our kids. And we're part of a larger learning community working together to build collective capacity in order to provide high quality, relevant, and equitable education for each and every student. So again, focusing on that tonight, I think, we look at the work that has been done, on our innovation spaces. And we see this as an enormous opportunity for teachers to learn from each other and to build that collective capacity so that we strive to create students who go for their passion, who see connection to their learning, who see a process, an inquiry process for problem solving, who see connections and relationships. So I think tonight, we believe we are living the mission to its fullest in what we have to present. So let's go to the next slide. I think also when you look at the three pillars, and again, you consider Wednesday and you consider tonight, you look at those three pillars, and really, I believe it is, we are engaging in an ambitious ask, but we truly believe that the asks are addressing academic excellence, equity, and social emotional health. And I think that is the focus as we go through tonight, as we reflect back on Wednesday night. These three pillars really are the guiding and the balancing and the four foundational points of our budgeting. So I think without further ado, let's go to the first slide here. And you can see our beautiful new middle school with its beautiful entrance. And if you take a look at that in the evening, it is beautiful and impressive. And we're very proud of the support of our Board of Education and our community to make this middle school possible. And so now I think what we will do is leave this presentation and move to our presentation on the innovation spaces. And so we're very fortunate to have Ms. Skeels, Mr. Gary Cimarelli, Laura Salonetti, and Kieran Weir, our two instructional coaches who will lead us through this. We'll start off with Mr. Cimarelli.
Thanks, Joe. What I might do before we get into these innovation spaces is talk to you a little bit about the past year from spring 20 to spring 2021. I know a couple of weeks ago, Julie Scriven talked to you about the amazing job her staff did, like getting the technology out to the students. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our teachers did, the faculty did in this past year. So the first thing is, if I go back and remember, I think it was March 12th, it was a Thursday, we had a meeting about what to do with the pandemic situation. And it was that Friday, we pretty much called it a staff day, I think, Joe. Students were brought home, and the teachers were asked to collect resources for those students to use at home. And within 24 hours, we had over 400 resources submitted to me that I posted for the students, teachers, and parents. And that was all done by teachers within 24 hours. That's the first thing that happened. The next thing that happened is, as Julie mentioned before, we are now one-to-one Chromebooks, K through 12. At that time, when the pandemic hit, we were a one-to-one grade 5 through 12. Students in grade 4 and 3 had Chromebooks in their room, and there were some Chromebooks in kindergarten and first grade. But within that month, all the students had Chromebooks at home, K through 12. So things are building now. Every teacher had to create a Google Classroom. Prior to that, pretty much the junior high and high school teachers all use Google Classroom. That's a platform we use for getting out digital materials to the students, as well as giving them assignments and turning them in. But at this time, every teacher, kindergarten through 12, as well as special areas, guidance counselors, all had to create a Google Classroom to communicate with both the students and the parents. That was happening within that first month. The next thing that happened is that when things were going on, many teachers and students really didn't know how to use a lot of the technology. And we had, in that first month or so, 225 video tutorials were created by the teachers to share with teachers and with students, which is a pretty amazing resource to have as well as those first 400 of them. The next thing that happened now is that because of those young students, the primary students, many of them didn't have Chromebooks or use Google Classroom and so forth. So the communications with the parents definitely increased almost on a daily basis using our Infinite Campus Messenger. And then Google Classroom has something called the Guardian, and that gives them an update every week of what the students have, what they're doing, and what they're missing. So a lot of stuff happened in that spring. Then come summer, what happened next is that because of the online learning and the hybrid type stuff, we had to get more subscriptions. And I think Julie Scriven talked to you about things like Seesaw for the K1, the reflexive math, Nearpod. So we increased our subscriptions for the students to use at home and teachers. Next thing we did is that we had 20 online professional development classes were offered for our teachers, and most times by the teachers themselves. These are all done through Zoom and online classes. We had a lot of them were about learning about the different technology, learning about our new subscriptions that was going on. And next we had the creation of the Teacher Academy website. It started off basically as the elementary remote school website. And on that website initially was how to get a digital classroom set up. It became then a K through 6 one. What we added on there is that Joe mentioned Kieran and Laura, our coaches, the elementary coaches, they put on a monthly basis, grades K through 6, the materials that the teachers should be covering. We had a lot of new teachers, both remote and in school, and they provide that still on that K through 6 Academy website. Next thing that happened is that we also created a brand new K through 6 ELA website, which has a lot of resources and lessons on that as well that we're using now in both schools. And finally, we had the creation of the elementary and the 7 through 12 remote school. That website was created for communication with parents to help students get onto Google Classrooms, and then for communications from that part on. So all this stuff really happened last spring to really the beginning of this summer, that part of it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to talk a little bit more about the innovation spaces. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. The teachers now also all know how to use full remote and hybrid instruction using a digital platform, such as Zoom and so forth. So this is one big, massive professional development year for all of our teachers and all of our students.
And Gary, one thing I would add in the development of those websites that you were just talking about, we used to use Rubicon Atlas curriculum mapping software, and that was a very expensive software to use. We used it over the years, and when Gary talked about the K through 6 ELA site or the K through 6 elementary site, one of the things we knew was if we got rid of the software, we had to have a way to host it ourselves. And we thought we could do it better using our Google tools and do it without paying tens of thousands of dollars to a software company. So that actually was planned and did coincide with the pandemic time, which made it a little bit more challenging, but also is far better because we can keep it live in real time and we're not paying somebody else to host it. And so that was a great change for the positive.
Yeah. So
now onto the theme of the night. So our middle school innovation spaces. So you'll remember that when we did the capital project and we were looking at our enrollment, one of the options was to potentially consider a new elementary school, maybe at the north end of town where the enrollment was growing. And one of the things that the board decided was it wouldn't be equitable to have one brand new elementary school and then 6 that weren't. So we decided instead that we would add on to the middle school, because if you start in North Colony, every child gets to come through the middle school. And so that was in the name of equity, that if we were going to have these new beautiful spaces, that they weren't going to be just in one building, but they would be available to all students. And when you see this project tonight, we had put in all along that we would have these innovation spaces, which sounded like these cool spaces. There's so much more than cool spaces, although they look very nice and they do look very cool. What they will allow us to do is, this is our tagline, translating passion into purpose. Kids do a lot outside of school today. So kids are making videos. Kids have their own YouTube channels by junior high school. Kids are doing things with technology that we don't necessarily even begin to understand sometimes. And here's the truth. They think that's their hobby. And they don't understand that the skills that they have can be used in jobs in the future. And so our goal with these innovation spaces is to help each student find something that he or she is really passionate about. And when we talk about equity, in the slide that Mr. Core did, the pillar, it says innovating to promote excellence, so that helps academics, and avoid opportunity gaps. Here's the big piece. Many of you may have seen recently that we had 2 different teams who did really well in the Future Cities competition, and our communications team made unbelievable videos about these kids building these cities on the moon. We all watched them and we were all enamored of these children. The truth is, during the pandemic, these are students who were fortunate enough to be able to have parents at home that could help them, to have the resources at home to build with, to have the technology at home so that they could communicate with each other even when they weren't in the same room. What we want is that opportunity for all children. There are a lot of kids who would think building a city on the moon is really cool. but they may not have access to those materials at home or that support at home. This is what we believe these innovation spaces will do, and we're really excited to share the vision for them with you tonight. So let's start first with a clear definition. What do we mean by innovation? So we want to invite teachers and students to explore, to research, to use tools to uncover something new. Our world is changing quickly. It involves a different way of looking at problems and solving them. And most importantly, embedding innovation time into our middle school day will allow all students to develop their creativity, problem-solving skills, and passion. And here's the piece that goes together. It's the students and the teachers working together. Some of you may have heard of something that was all the rage maybe 5 years ago. It was called a makerspace. And it was where you would have a space in the building. You have all these really cool materials. You might have pipe cleaners, and you might have cardboard boxes and paper towel tubes. And kids could go in and they could make things, and it would be fascinating and interesting. Here's the thing. Those things time out after a while because, yeah, there's probably a kid somewhere who's a genius who's going to build a rocket out of that. But for most kids, it was great. It was fun and it was play, but it didn't actually develop a skill set. And so here's my analogy that I'd like you to think about as we go through this. If I wanted to play tennis and I had a tennis racket and a tennis ball and a brick wall, I could hit that tennis ball against the brick wall every day, and I would probably get a little bit better. But unless I had somebody to help me to say, hey, do you know you could do a backhand or forehand? I'm probably not going to get that far unless I happen to be like, an unbelievable genius prodigy in tennis, which I wouldn't be. But if Mr. Cimarelli, who is a really good tennis player, showed me one lesson, then I might get a little bit better. And then if he could push me a little bit farther, I could get a little bit better. And then as I got better at it, I would really like it. And then I might have the minute to be able to say to somebody, hey, Mr. Core, guess what? I'm a tennis player because I found something that I'm good at and I enjoy, and I found a bunch of people who like it too. I'm going to be really honest. That's something we do incredibly well in this district. For example, with music. Our music kids find each other early. They know each other. They want to be in the music wing of the building. We do it really well with art classes. Kids know that they have an outlet in art. They love it. We do it well with athletics. We do it really well with, let's say, the pure academics. The kids who want to come in and go AP all the way, they're going. They know their people. We're saying, how do we use this incredibly critical age of grades 6 through 8 to open the possibilities? So the goal is when every child leaves 8th grade, they've had exposure to something that they never actually thought was a school subject and really is, and they're good at it. And they may not present in a way that everybody else does in reading and writing, but boy, they're really good at building something. And so this is a really exciting time for us. I think this puts North Colony on the cutting edge, because I don't know of another district who has anything like what we're about to propose.
So about 2 years ago, Kathy asked me to think about these innovation spaces and go visit schools and so forth. So I really sat back and thought about the middle school, innovation spaces, where we want to have 5 spaces exact same, like Kathy was saying, that you want to have 5 maker spaces. So I just been thinking about what's going on. The first thing I thought about was we have a group of teachers, about 22 teachers called the Instructional Technology Resource Teachers. It changes year to year, different groups of teachers over the years. And over the past few years, we've come up with about 100 skills, technology skills we felt that every student by the time they finish grade 5 should have. So I'm going to kind of build a story here about how we came up with the concept of the innovation labs. The first thing is skills. The next thing I do a lot is I work a lot with teachers with integrating technology. Most teachers right now engage. Now engagement, what that means is as the technology motivates students to start the learning process. A lot of our teachers are doing this now. The next phase would be to enhance. That part of it says, let me move my Zoom for a second. Sorry about that. That's saying, does the tech create paths for students to demonstrate their understanding? Now we're getting a little bit deeper on the technology end of it, that part. And the final part is going to be to extend it. Do our students have interest in going beyond the school day and using their technology? The next thing is, I did a lot of studying with something called the ISTE Standards for Students, which is the International Society for Teaching and Education. We have the Global Collaborator, Computational Thinker, the Knowledge Constructor, Creative Communicator, Innovative Designer, and Digital Citizen. I'll be telling you a little bit more about that in the next coming slides. And the final thing is I had an opportunity to go with a lot of people to visit these innovation labs in different schools. I saw labs that were empty. I saw labs that had a lot of equipment in them but weren't being used. And I saw some labs being used. And what I saw with those labs being used, it was usually manned by a teacher who was working with teachers to integrate different projects like that part of it. So what I want to do now is all this stuff is going to build to the concept we have, the framework for new innovation spaces. I want to show you a video right now about the ISTE standards on the next slide. Whoops. Are you writing that, Karen? That one? Sorry about that. Keep going if you would.
Organic, transformative, global, expert-inspired, authentic, aspirational. The ISTE standards for students are about learners who live, work, and play in a technology-infused world. The ISTE student standards support a learner-driven approach. They are a blueprint by and for innovative educators worldwide to guide education transformation and meaningful, future-ready learning. The standards embrace learners in their current stage through thoughtful integration of ed tech. These standards amplify learning and empower student voice. They prepare today's learners for the new literacies they face and for a global workforce yet to be envisioned. They are not about using technology. They are about giving voice to learners the world over and ensuring that learning is a student-centered process of exploration and discovery.
I'm an empowered learner. Je suis une citoyenne numérique. Я конструктор знаний.
我是一位创新设计者。
Computational thinker. Soy un comunicador creativo. I am a global collaborator.
The ISTE Standards for Students, a comprehensive, practical approach to developing lifelong learners. ISTE, Connected Learning, Connected World.
And Karen, next slide.
Organic,
Okay, so a couple key words from that video. One was, a couple of them was learner-driven, student voice. Okay, so our goal really is to to create an empowered learner, which is a student who identifies your unique strengths. So our goal now, as what Kathy was saying, is to create that pathway. So let me go back and talk about each one of these ISTE standards again. The global collaborator, as you can see, students use digital tools to broaden their perspective and enrich their learning by collaborating with others and working effectively in teams, local and globally. Again, think about these spaces. Creative communicator. Students communicate clearly and express themselves creatively for a variety of purposes using the platform, tools, styles, formats, and digital media approach to their goals. The knowledge constructor is a student who critically curates a variety of resources using digital tools to construct knowledge, produce creative artifacts, make meaningful learning experiences for themselves and others. Computational thinker. That one is students develop and employ strategies for understanding and solving problems in ways that leverage the power of technology methods to develop and test solutions. The innovative designer. Again, the students use a variety of technologies within the design process to identify and solve problems by creating new, useful, and imaginative solutions. And finally, the digital citizen. Students recognize the rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of living, learning, and working in an interconnected digital world. So from these, the skills, the ISTE standards, what we have to do, I want to show you about how we came up with the framework for the innovation spaces. I worked from the top down. I thought about the high school. The high school, according to the state, has these 6 different pathways. You can see them up there yourself. And what happens many times, like Kathy was saying, students start making those choices pretty much in high school, making their choice. Wouldn't it be great to have them start making these choices earlier in grades 6 through 8? So what we come up with is 5 different themes for the innovation spaces. You see them there: video and podcasting, coding and robotics, health, wellness, and mindfulness, makerspace, and humanities. So the first one, and that one, to be doing the application of it all. In high school, to be doing choosing their pathway. And at the elementary level, remember I talked about those skills they need to learn? At that level, to be learning the different skills and then apply them at 6 or 8 and then make their choices from that one. This is a pathway that we designed for our innovation spaces in the middle school, that part of it. Again, we review them: Videography and Podcasting Center, Coding, Robotics, Computer Applications, Health, Wellness, Mindfulness Center, the Makerspace, and now Humanities Center. And right now we're going to have Kieran and Laura talk about these different spaces.
Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
So now we're going to take a closer look at the 5 spaces and really what will they look like and then what will happen in those spaces. So let's take a look room by room. The first room that we have here is the Videography and Podcasting Center. And this is a space that will give students the opportunity to use their voice while they create videos and podcasts, among other projects. You can see in the images here, you have an aerial shot of the architect's rendering, and that will give you a sense of what the space will look like overall. This room will also have foldable whiteboard tables so that students can brainstorm, storyboard, or design right on the table. These tables are easily movable and can be nested together. There's a conference room in this innovation space that will also have a green wall that students can use as like a green screen, and if they want to record videos and have different backgrounds. There will also be comfortable seating for a TV show or interviewing vibe. There is one additional side room that can be used for quiet work or recording. On this slide, you will see some possible skills that can be taught under the boot camp heading. These skills will be folded into content-driven projects decided on in collaboration with grade level and content area teams. So for example, during the boot camp, students may learn about WeVideo, something that our district has a subscription to. And they might learn how to upload content, add music, and use the narration functions. And then during the year, if a teacher gives students an assignment and gives them a choice and says, I'm going to have you report out on a book, you can do so by maybe creating a book trailer using WeVideo in this room, or possibly creating a podcast episode. Students would then work with the innovation teacher to assist in accomplishing that task. So now Laura will introduce to you our next space.
So here's a rendering of the outside of what one of the labs might look like. You can see how the name is on the outside and possibly some decals may be added to the windows. In the robotics, coding, and computer applications lab, you can see the room was designed so that the tables can fold and nest and possibly be cleared from the room. Flexibility to move the furniture was key in this room so it can be opened up for activities. The tables are once again whiteboard tables that can all flip and nest and be moved into that side room. The room also has stools that can be stacked to the side of the room. In addition to the tables and stools, this room will also have lockable cabinets in the main room that can store materials when they are not in use. We have once again listed some ideas for boot camp skills, as well as how you may see students using the lab for projects. You might see students learning how to use a makey-makey in the boot camp classes, and then using it to create a solution to a problem they see in the school, or can create an interactive map using a makey-makey to explain and recite factual information on a place that they have studied. This would also bring them to the videography and podcasting room to record their information into the computer.
The third space is the Health, Wellness, and Mindfulness Center. Here, students can find a calm and soothing place to collect their thoughts and learn strategies to cope with daily stresses. Social and emotional needs can be met in this comforting and safe space. Again, you will see an aerial view of the space, and this space was really designed with a lot of flexible and soft seating. The tables and furniture can be arranged and moved to accommodate different activities and group work. This room also has stackable stools, tables, and modern beanbag chairs. The furniture and space can be modified to accommodate guest speakers and presentations. There's ample storage and movable whiteboards for students to work on. In this room, there'll be many health and wellness skills and activities. We see this room being used for mindfulness, stress-reducing techniques, restorative circles, and health science lessons. So for example, students may learn a variety of strategies to be mindful and reduce anxiety, and then they may come to the space and create a calming jar to help in that anxiety reduction. Laura will now introduce you to the makerspace.
Thank you. So in the makerspace, you can see this room has a large amount of storage built into the sides of the tables and along the wall for additional materials and projects. This room has butcher block tables and stackable stools so that students can easily move around the room. The side room has additional storage with a closed storage option for materials that need to be locked up or put out of the way. Students can use the side room for a quiet work environment or can also slide the table to the side to have a bigger floor space if they want to work on a larger or taller project. So here are some of the boot camp and project ideas for the makerspace. Students may learn how to use SketchUp to design a scene in a book that they are reading, and then may bring it to life with the materials in the room, or they may be working on an engineering design challenge.
Lastly, we have the Humanities Center. This space is for students to learn how to effectively present and communicate their ideas. The Humanities room is designed with semicircle soft seating so that students can work comfortably or they can face a presenter. The high top table around the back of the comfortable seating can also be a space where students can work on projects or type quietly. There are 2 lecterns on a small elevated stage for students who are presenting or debating. There will be 2 chairs that accompany the lecterns for students or presenters who choose to sit. There will also be small tables that can be easily moved and soft stools for students to use as seats or as a spot to put their materials while they are working. So here are some of the boot camp and project ideas that we have envisioned for the Humanities room. Students may learn how to logically structure a claim, or how when they create infographics, font size, color, and white space can impact its effectiveness. They may then participate in a debate. They may have to defend a claim, or maybe they're creating a Google Slides presentation where they're applying their knowledge of white space and how that impacts a piece. This is just a few examples from the Humanities Center. As you can see from the list above, the skills being taught in this space are essential and necessary for all of the work being done in STEM. So now that you have seen the spaces and heard some possible projects, let's really look at the big picture. What would a year of learning in the innovation space possibly look like? So here's a possible first quarter in these innovation rooms. During the first few weeks of school, the innovation room teachers could meet with grade level teams from all of the halls to collaborate and plan various activities and projects that could be done throughout the year incorporating these spaces. Students would spend time in the first quarter developing a possible list of Genius Hour projects that they could complete during the year. This work could be done in conjunction with the librarian to help develop essential questions or wonder questions, as well as with the classroom teacher and the innovation teacher. Students would then rotate through all 5 innovation spaces during the second half of the first quarter. Each week, they will be visiting one of the 5 different rooms in a set rotation with their class, possibly accompanied by their homeroom teacher. During this 5-week rotation, they will have a boot camp where they learn skills specific to the room, but also possibly skills that are specific to those projects that they created with their grade level teams in the first 5 weeks. Now Laura will talk you through quarter 2.
Okay, thank you. So after the 5-week boot camp, students will enter into a 10-week project cycle for quarter 2. During this cycle, students will continue to use their access period for IEP and support services and to seek out extra help or assistance from a teacher, but they may also now choose an innovation space or spaces to work in for their projects. This may be the projects created during the first 5 weeks of collaboration with the teachers, or to work on a Genius Hour project, which might be an idea from the list they created during the first quarter of school. If students are unable to go during their access period, there will also be additional open lab times to allow for students who need flexibility for when they can use the lab. Students will sign up for the innovation room at least a day in advance by filling out a form indicating the work they're going to be completing when they go to the innovation rooms. Having students declare their purpose in the space will let the innovation teacher know the goal each student has set and allows for the teacher to prep the space properly with materials. Teachers may also choose to sign up one or more of their classes to work in the innovation room. They will sign up using a virtual calendar in advance. Remaining slots will be released to students who can then sign up for any available slot in the innovation room of their choice. Each week, the innovation space teacher will also be running workshops for students who are interested in learning new skills. The workshop will provide an opportunity for students to continue to learn new skills for the room or rooms of their choosing.
Quarter 3 and 4 will follow suit of quarter 1 and 2. Students in quarter 3 will start to develop new projects, or they might be continuing work on projects from second quarter. Or they may even participate in workshops offered by the innovation teacher. Another round of boot camp could follow, and finally, another 10-week project cycle. So now that we've seen the possibilities of each space, and we've kind of seen a quick glance at a possibility of what a year might look like, Kathy is going to show you another way the spaces could be used for interdisciplinary team projects.
Thank you, Karen and Laura, for that. And Gary, really very much appreciate it. A lot of information to share, but think of it like this. We used to have the ability when I was a teacher to say, hey, I have this project I'm working on in English class. I'd like to work with my librarian and I'd like to take the kids to the library and we'd like to collaborate and change and go more in depth so students can learn more. Now the innovation spaces give us other places in addition to the library to work. So here's an example that we could use. So A Long Walk to Water is, as you can see, based on a true story about the water crisis in the Sudan. It's aimed for middle grade readers. It would probably be really good for 6th grade and a little bit easy for 7th grade. But sometimes we read something a little bit easier because of topical understanding. So let's say 7th grade team is thinking about this topic. And in ELA class, they're going to read that book. That's great. In science class, relatedly, they're going to study water management because that's something that's going to be really important in our future, and desertification and what that's going to mean in the United States. In social studies, they might look at this idea of climate refugees and expand to a more in-depth study of refugee and immigration issues. In math class, they might graph and chart correlations between poverty, race, and access to clean water globally and nationally, because we know it's not just a global problem. We have issues with that in our own country. And then in health class, they might study the impact of clean drinking water on community health. So when the junior high all those years ago was created, and there were halls The reason that we have invested in this Hall system for so long was the power of interdisciplinary learning. It was the small school within the larger school, but I will say pre-NCLB, when Mr. Core and I worked there, it was about how you brought kids together in a developmentally appropriate, project-oriented way to engage them, to challenge them, to have them work on their social skills, but also to go deep into a topic. And it all went away when we started getting state testing every single year. It just did, not just in North Colony and everywhere. So we have this pandemic and we're coming back from it. And something we talked about was, how do we bring kids back without thinking like, oh my gosh, you're so far behind, and adding to the anxiety? How do we do something that's engaging and interesting and different? So now, as a team, maybe they're studying the whole question of, how are we good friends to the earth? And that's a question that they're studying all year with all these related topics. But then here's where the innovation spaces come in. Let's say I know I would be this kid. I would want to go to the humanities room. They know that. I love the humanities room. I would imagine that my entry point to this unit would be the social justice piece. And I would want to go, and I would want my project on this. I am going to study water as a human right. I'm going to give a presentation. I'm going to make a TED talk. I'm going to try it out in the humanities lab. I'm going to record it in the videography lab. But that's going to be my way that I can say, this is what water means to me. It's a social justice issue. Some other kid who's far more interested in the science aspect of it might be like, that's great, you can do that. But I'd actually like to think there's got to be a way that we can separate salt water from water and make drinkable water. I'd like to work in the makerspace to create something where potentially we're inventing something. These are things kids get to do in the high school in science research, but it's only a tiny group of kids. This is all kids finding a way in. Coding and computer applications lab. So I'm the kid who really likes the math class, and I'm looking at these charts and I can't believe the data I'm seeing. I can't believe what I see in Flint, Michigan. I didn't even know that could happen in my own country. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to study, and I'm going to use a computer program to present to, maybe we're all in Marcy Hall. I'm going to present this to my friends in Haystack Hall, and I'm going to teach them about the water crisis right here in the United States with my graphs and charts. Videography and podcasting. You know what? I'm that kid who I want to find out who our local EPA representative is. I want to interview that person. I want to find out, how is this impacting New York State? Didn't we just have a water crisis locally a few years ago? I want to talk to that EPA person about that. I want to interview them because that's interesting to me. Health and Wellness Center. You know what? Like, I want to think about, what are these new careers? Obviously, in a changing climate and changing to a different kind of fuel system, there have to be new green careers. I want to research that. I want to teach other kids about that. So this could be just one hall working on this. And the great thing is, across all the halls at the junior high, it would be great if two halls could partner. Hey, we're going to teach you all about water. Great. We're going to teach you all about how you can live on Mars. So the idea is, if you go back to my initial analogy, this is to deepen the content knowledge. I can't stress this enough. These labs, without being dependent on learning certain things in classes, without content knowledge, you're really just having indoor recess. And although that has some value, it shouldn't be the only value. And so when we have time for collaboration and planning, it actually should help kids to see this. Like, this is not just something I'm doing because it's on the state test. This is something I'm doing because it matters. And maybe I'm that kid who suddenly learns in the middle school that I'm a kid who's really dedicated to service projects. I want to be that person who makes change in the world. Or I'm a kid who never thought about experiments before. I did labs in science, but like, I never really thought about it. But wait, I could make something that could make my society better, maybe even my local town better. This is the way in 6th, 7th, and 8th. That's where we lose them. K-5, we've got them. By 9, 12, if we've lost them in 6, 7, 8, this is where. So when there's those pathways that Gary started with, the board will remember when Eric presented to the board on those pathways years ago when the state opened that up. but it's hard to choose a pathway other than sort of the college pathway that everybody sort of knows. I'm going to take, all the Regents exams I need to take because that's what everybody knows, if you haven't had broader exposure. So now when you're a kid, and I'm going to be honest with you, let's say you're a young girl and you're in this age and you're in these classes and you're really good at this. Maybe this is you like making things with your hands, which is not typically considered what girls do. But suddenly you're good at it and there's a whole bunch. That opens up possibilities in 9 through 12 because you're not suddenly bound by any kind of preconceived notions. So this is just one example, but we could easily look at the spaces. And I want to say that we defined what we wanted the spaces to be. And then we met with the construction team and said, how can you build these spaces for us? So we had a purpose in mind, and then we built it with the furniture, the projects, the kind of furniture that we would need in order to make this happen. And these will evolve over the years because next year we expect all kids in 6, 7, and 8 are going to need it. But once the 6th graders next year get this boot camp, they're not going to need the boot camp again as 7th graders. Everybody's going to be new next year. So it only evolves over the years. And that's actually the really exciting part. As, life and technology changes. And, Karen shared a really interesting story when she was in 6th grade. Karen, can you share that story about the video you showed and the kids, and they were like, wait, that's even a job?
Yeah. So something that when we would study space, we would watch I'd pick some videos to watch with the kids about space. And whenever they would bring someone on to do a quick interview, I'd ask them to pay attention to their titles. And there was one that was like IO, like a volcano specialist for the moon IO. And kids would say, what? That's a job that exists at NASA? And I would say, yes, you can get into geology and then you can study distant moons and other spaces. So it was always interesting to see that the only jobs kids really thought about with NASA were things like being an astronaut, until they started looking at some of these smaller titles and realized that there were people specializing in so many different areas of science under NASA.
Thanks, Karen. So that's what we're hoping to do in conjunction with our classroom teachers in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And the big piece of this that we're really proud of and meeting with the junior high administrators is building a schedule where all kids get to do this. So all kids, and that's the equitable piece. It's during the school day. We have clubs after school. Not all kids can stay after school, even if they want to. Their life doesn't allow it to happen. If this is part of the day, because we think it's important for all kids to have these experiences, we've built it into the day. And that's the part that's really also, it will increase their academic ability, but it's equitable. And we would also argue it helps with social emotional health, because if you're engaged and you find that thing like, oh my gosh, I'm good at this, to be able to say, I am an artist, or I am a scientist, I'm a writer. When you can say that, you found your people, you found something you're good at, you find a way you can make a contribution. That's why we exist in education. Every kid who crosses the stage at graduation should have that feeling inside them. And the more opportunities we have for them to define it, so that they don't think like astronaut is the only thing you can do in space. Oh my goodness, no. And how we open up so many of these examples is really exciting. Thanks, Kieran.
No problem. The last slide that we have here is something that we mentioned that there would be weekly and monthly workshops offered in each innovation space. And here is just a sample of how the innovation space teachers would advertise these workshop offerings. We could see that each one of these buttons has a link underneath it so that students could sign up using a virtual page or form. So everything up until now, this is really how we envision the innovation teachers and the students using those spaces next year.
So if we think about this, we are going to have, because this was also part of the construction project, we will have an innovation space in each of our elementary schools. It'll work slightly differently in our elementary schools. So in K3, you see it says structured inquiry. That just means obviously the teacher is doing a lot of the leading because the little ones are little, right? So we imagine in K3 that the classroom teachers would be able to take the students down to the innovation space. And really in those primary grades, particularly right now, and all this could evolve over time, we're really thinking about purposeful play. Our kids have been apart from society. They've been apart from their peers. They've been behind screens a lot. So we're talking about the big blocks, and they're going down like the kindergartners, and they're just doing block challenges and teams, like literally building with their hands. We're talking about that kind of work where they learn. That's where you learn your social skills. That's where you learn how not to get mad at your friend when they knock the tower over. So this is really the social emotional skills that we teach as part of those early grades can happen in this room where they have this open and much less structured space. So we would have weekly activities and challenges for K3. The classroom teacher would bring it down, but it would be much more low stakes and much more working on those skills that you have to build when you come from home, maybe, and you have to learn now there's 20 kids in a class and you have to take turns and you have to wait. As we get into 4th and 5th grade, though, and obviously content becomes more challenging and there's more to do, we look at that as controlled inquiry, where the teacher is still going to choose, but the students start to use resources to answer questions. And in our model, what we're proposing is that in 4th grade, the librarians will work with the 4th grade teacher teams, and they will host with the classroom teacher the 4th grade students in the innovation labs. So they will collaborate in the same kind of ways and work on projects. And then in 5th grade, the art teacher in the building will host with the 5th grade teacher team, and they'll look at elements of design and helping students to understand how they can display their knowledge of their projects with a different lens, more of a graphic design lens, both of which feed into what you see as those labs in 6 through 8. So we're starting to build more structured skills. In 6 through 8, that's what we were just talking about, what it looks like in the middle school, where they are now guided, but they have a little bit more freedom. And then ultimately, obviously in 9 through 12, we want them to be able to choose their pathways, have some topics that they're choosing and that they're starting to guide, so that when they do get to college or the workforce after grade 12, they have that level of independence because we haven't been spoon feeding them all along. So thinking of the 6 through 8, since that was the biggest focus, Davis, I believe, is on the call. And Davis, would you like to talk about, like, you're thinking about what this could potentially do for the kids and the culture of the building?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Skeels. And if this is out of the box. And I know when I first saw this, it took me a little while to get it to sink in. So I would challenge you, if those of you who are sort of struggling to connect some of this, I think the slide where Kathy was talking about the interdisciplinary work from connecting with A Long Walk to Water, go back and watch that again. This really connects to the work we did all the way back 4 years ago when we started talking about what a middle school could be, when we sat at the Talent Colony, all the way up through our work with the Middle School Advisory Committee last year. What are we looking for our students? What do we want them to have? We want them to have engaging work. We want them to have choice. We want their work to be relevant. And to be able to do that, essentially, I kind of equate this in a simplified way. It's like having 5 unique libraries. So imagine that, 5 unique libraries, but we have control over the content and when those libraries change to meet the ever-changing needs of this world that keeps moving faster and faster. We don't have control over all the standards at State Ed. We don't. But we do have control over this plan. And I think I really think about those trend lines where when you look at our students as they over time, students become less and less engaged in school. I'm not saying our school or our schools. I'm saying that is a national trend. How do you turn that around? You give them relevant, you give them control, you give them choice and flexibility, and you support them along the way. And to me, this is the step to that. We're excited. Ms. Lang, Mr. Zadorian, and I have been working on how to get this in a schedule. We think we can make it work. And We're talking about starting a foundation for this next year. But I think if we learned anything from the pandemic, we're not going to start with perfection. We're going to have to keep changing to make it keep working. And we're able to do that. That's one of the learnings we've learned from the last year. Hopefully we don't have to change as frequently every 5 minutes. We definitely know we're much more capable than I think we thought we were in the past. So I can't thank this team enough for this work. I'm excited to keep working with this. We're excited to bring more players into this because I think expanding the collaborative circle of conversation about this will only lead to more opportunities on how we can really maximize this. So thank you all.
Thanks, Davis. And so something that you heard Gary mention earlier was when we did do research on these labs and we looked around, it's not dissimilar to a library without a librarian. Kids might go down there and check out books, but it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be connected to the curriculum. It's not going to be able to grow kids' skills in a certain way. So each of these labs would be staffed with a teacher who is on special assignment. So that would be a district teacher who would have a full 5-class day. And so the videography and podcasting, coding, makerspace, and humanities center. The one that would be slightly different is the health, wellness, and mindfulness center, which would be staffed by the Shaker Middle School counseling staff. That's a great space for them. And we've been talking about, obviously, all the teaching that we do to help kids with social emotional skills, not just the crisis reaction. So this fits really in with our mission and our counselors and the work that they do with kids when they're talking with them about conflict resolution, when they're talking with them about stress management. And what we want is all kids to get those lessons, because let's face it, sometimes the crisis response is the kid who's manifesting, but there are kids who are quietly stressed out, but they're just not showing it outwardly. And so if we're only hitting the kids who are manifesting through poor grades or through behaviors, we may be missing a group of kids who knows how to keep on a happy face, but inside is in turmoil. So this is really related to that proactive work that we want to do with all kids as we come back. And as we continue into the future, their lives are stressful. We know that. And helping them with all the social media stress that comes in middle school age. All of this is part of the work that we're going to do. And Mr. Core, I don't know if you wanted to speak to this.
Well, all I can say is that, first of all, thank you all for your collaboration in presenting here. But we are truly excited about our innovation labs, and we looked at these as one of the cornerstones of Shaker Middle School when we executed that design. This team filled and fleshed out that vision and did an outstanding job of it. I also reflect back to, again, going back to the original comments at the start of it, and Ms. Skeels, you did an excellent job here of reinforcing that as well. This is really mission aligned, and it focuses here, and it does we think, an excellent job of fusing the academic and the social emotional, because we truly believe, that when kids are engaged, when students find meaning, when students find purpose, that engaged, exciting learning, empowering learning, students who realize that they have a place in the world and have agency in the world, all of those are very important to not only your academic learning, but also your social emotional wellness and growth. So again, we are extremely excited about next year, and the belief that we have right now that our middle school will open as planned as a 6, 7, 8 building. Our belief that we are going to come back at full capacity. All of these are based on that faith projection, if you will. And I think, perhaps to make this somewhat more understandable to our board members, some of our board members may remember And it does seem like a long time ago, but it really was only in the summer of 2019. And during that summer of 2019, in that ancient history, we had a retooled elementary summer program where students, rather than going in and rehearsing regular school again during the summer, engaged in project-based learning, embedded reading and writing and some mathematics in that project-based learning, pursued topics of interest, of great interest, looked at 3D virtual learning, studied sharks, for example, many topics that were very, very appealing to our intermediate and early becoming middle school students. So that experience there was an exciting experience for kids. It was a motivating experience for kids. So much learning went on there. So I think, that was a springboard really for the work that you see here tonight. And I think at this point in time, we can open it up to questions. Mrs. Nardolillo, Mr. Vondell, I would like to turn it back to you.
Thank you. We'll start with questions from the Board of Education. I know there's a lot of information that was presented tonight. Do we have any questions from board members?
I have a question, Mary.
Yes,
Sandy.
Please, go ahead.
Hi. What's the capacity of each room? Would it hold 30 students in every one of those rooms? That's one of the questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. In the humanities lab or space, it didn't look like there was seating for 30, but I believe that you must have figured that out.
Yeah, there's not in the initial, so if it's a smaller group, but what we did was in those back rooms, there are smaller desks and chairs that are on wheels so that we can roll them out if we have more kids in there.
The other question I have is about the videography, podcasting. If I'm not mistaken, the middle school, formerly the junior high, had a broadcast, like a studio behind the library. Because I'm thinking about the equipment needs you have for doing, those two chairs with the interview table in between and everything. Is there going to be any kind of consolidation to, use the equipment that we have, or are there going to be two separate spaces?
I can talk to that. The studio, I think, is more of a formal. We're going to be doing announcements and so forth, more sophisticated equipment. The podcasting room itself, innovation space, is more for large classes that come in. It's going to be basically using their Chromebooks to create these videos. There will be green space with some basic, simple camcorders for recording and so forth. So it's a much different space. The studio is more formal. This is much more informal. Be a lot of storyboarding and writing on whiteboards and discussions. So it's a really different space in the TV studio.
Okay, and in the coding, will that be done with the Chromebooks that students have, or will there need to be additional, like robotics that has special equipment, doesn't it?
Chromebooks should meet the needs of most of the coding we'll be doing with the kids at that level.
Okay.
Part of it. But there may be some other little programs with the robotics as well, additional stuff. But for the most part, again, kids come in with their Chromebooks, they can do coding. They can program robotics with it. They can do a lot of different things with the Chromebooks.
Okay, cool,
and Sandy, those are great questions. If I can just say too about the difference between the actual studio space that's attached to the library and this center is the studio space has more advanced technology, right? Because it's got the soundboard and it's got other things like that. In this space, they're also learning what makes a good video. They all think they're great at shooting video, and some are better than others. So what's the narrative arc of your video? How does it work? What makes an engaging podcast? What is an interesting interview? What is not? So there's more skill there where the kids who are going into the studio have more of that down and are just ready to use it. So I think the two kind of build
different levels.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. It sounds very exciting. Very, very exciting.
Mary, I had a question.
Yes, Sam, please go ahead.
This one's about staffing. We talked about, or you mentioned that the 4 spaces are staffed with one full-time teacher on special assignment. So I'm assuming that would rotate as appropriate for the teachers. But are we? And I know we'll be talking about this later this evening. Are we anticipating additional staffing needs in order to staff the innovation spaces, or would these be existing teaching positions that have been moved from somewhere else? And how is that going to work?
They would be, we have a plan to move existing teachers into those positions.
Okay, so we're not creating we might be creating new titles or something for them, but we're not creating new positions to staff this.
That's the plan as
of now
exists. Correct.
Okay, and that includes for the counseling staff. I'm sure the counseling staff has their hands full with everything that's going on right now as it is. We're not worried about drawing on resources that are needed for other things.
No, because these are things that they would be teaching anyway. So these are part of the proactive. So it just gives them a different
space. A better space to do it.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a teaching element to the work that is done by our mental health staff as well.
How about the scheduling? Have you talked about that amongst the committee that has developed this really ingenious plan? Have you talked about how do we fit this into the student's schedule?
In a couple different ways. I don't know if anybody on here, I'm going to embarrass Laura right now. I don't know if anybody on here has seen the show The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. But if you've seen that, like at night, she lies in bed and like her ceiling comes alive and she sees chess pieces moving. For Laura, like at night, she sees schedule pieces moving. Like we knew that. So she had like 35 iterations just to get us going, which is what we needed to prove that it could be possible. Because, we didn't want to build it and have only certain kids have access to it. That's what we were afraid of. Now, in the end, when that gets translated to a building of 1,400 kids, does it work out as easily? So then that's where Davis, Dawn, Jan have been working on it to say, okay, we got the vision. How do we now get the pieces? So we just met on it again today, but I'll let Davis speak to it. But I know they have several different iterations of that going right now.
Okay.
I think it's building the base schedule where this is a point of access for all students, so it's a period, and then it's a schedule within the schedule. So once we have that, Jan and we're getting closer to that, and then Jan and Dawn are going over to Laura's house to look at her ceiling with her, figure out the schedule within the schedule piece.
Well, I'm very excited, and I'm really glad, as was mentioned, that it will be open to all students.
Yeah.
Every student will have an opportunity to do this, and I think it's awesome.
I agree with Mrs. Nardolillo. I think that's one of the most important statements that you made, Kathy, is that we're building a schedule that's going to allow all kids to be part of this. And too many times over the years, I feel that we have left out kids, and the board has never liked that. And this gives me great hope for you use the word empowering, and we have to empower all students, and this gives me a lot of hope. And I also none of this is going to be easy. I don't look at this is going to be a challenge, and I know the staff is up to it. I think a lot of our students will need support to do what you want these kids to do, and but our staff is up to it, and I think there is no reason not to be optimistic, because it's really this is one of the best things we've ever done here. Yeah.
And I just want to thank, I see Annette's here. I'm not sure if Jerry Lynn or Abby is on tonight, but Annette, Jerry Lynn, and Abby have been working with me as a subgroup of the elementary principals to kind of flesh out what the elementary could look like. But this was the other piece that I just want to end on is this was the other reason we thought about investing in a middle school, that if you change the middle school model, it pushes both ways. So we want something, the kids who graduate from a middle school have a different experience in high school. And then if we want this experience at the middle school, we're going to have a different experience in elementary school to get them ready. So it feels exciting to us too, because it feels like this is really finally, like it took us the year, and in some ways, obviously this has clearly been a horrible year, but from where Gary started, you know, and everything we had to learn over this year, we're more ready to operationalize these than we would have been a year ago, because we've all discovered we can do things we never imagined ever before. So it's exciting. And now I don't know if you want a second to just speak about your thought on the elementary, but I know it's not as fleshed out at the elementary, but it's in progress.
So my vision of what could happen at the elementary at the 4th and 5th grade level is really that integration. So the long walk to water kinds of projects that could happen at the grade level. So, you know, sometimes if you speak to a child's their specialty, that opens them up to learning in other content areas that may be more challenging for them. So I'm excited about the mindset of integration and helping kids see the connections and to what they're learning and between what they're learning. And then at the K-3 level, I'm excited that we know how much kids enjoy playing. We all have had those moments where we're playing and we're learning, and it couldn't be more fun and engaging. I'm excited to have really purposeful play and have that be part of every child's school day. Having those joyful experiences, those aha moments, those experiences where they get to collaborate and learn from someone who's maybe really quiet, but who really builds really well. I mean, those opportunities to see each other differently, I think will go beyond whatever physics they might be tinkering with that day. It's just, to me, this is really exciting stuff. So I could probably blather on for hours about how fun it would be, but I'm excited to get started on fleshing out in more detail what the elementary experience could be.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have questions before we open it up to our budget committee?
It looked like Paula had a question.
I was just going to say that right now my brain can't wrap around how to get 1,400 kids into boot camp, through the boot camp into a second phase, and have them be able to get into the spaces independently and then have teachers use the space at the same time. I'm sure it'll all work out, but I just can't imagine how that's going to get done. I'm not saying it's not going to, it's.
Quite frankly, Paula, that's the way my mind worked too. That's why I had to see Laura's spreadsheets, because I was like, I don't understand how this can happen.
Sounds exciting though.
Okay, so we will now open it up to our budget representatives. If there are any questions, it's hard for us to see everyone that's in attendance. So if you have a question, you go right ahead, speak up, and you'll appear.
Hi, Mary. Trish Vecchione. I have a question. So I love that all students will have access to this space. But also thinking of that is, there's different subgroups. Our gifted learners, our special ed learners that may also have, different things they can get from this space. Will those subgroups, when they function within those subgroups, have access to the space as well, or will it all be planned out and filled throughout the day?
No, so right now, as we're working through the schedules, we have it designed so that there are those drop-in periods. So depending on, so kids have free periods at the middle school, if you're talking during the day. So that's where that chart that they showed, so they can jump in and say like, okay, oh, good, today, period 4, I can go down and do this. So they'll have those opportunities. So that's part of what we're building. First, we'll build the schedule part because that's the harder piece, obviously, and then have the opportunities for other enriching activities. And that's the beauty of it, because different kids are going to have different interests.
I guess though, I guess I didn't ask that correctly. So like, for example, will the LEP subset, will they be scheduled a time as well so they can take advantage of the space in a different way? They tend to do very different projects than some of our other learners need, just because it's what they need to learn. Will that be open to the LEP group as well?
It's going to be open to all kids in the school. So whether it gets scheduled for a certain class, obviously we have to see how many periods in the day we can get in, but every kid will have opportunity and time in those spaces.
I think the beauty of the labs is that they are differentiated in and of themselves by nature of what they're offering, that your sky is your limit in each of those labs. You can keep running as fast as you can. You don't have to wait for anybody. Once you have the basic skills, you're sprinting. You may ask them for some support questions, but there could be such a host of variety of questions that come up that are all about so many different things. You know what I mean? I don't see a tracking aspect of it. That's one of the things that I really like.
And I do think it was part of the things that have troubled us all along. If you look at equity and creating gaps, sometimes we unintentionally create gaps within our system by providing students who may inherently have advantages, more advantages. And what we are now providing is that the inquiry that was indigenous really to the LEP process and the like is really good learning for each and every child. So I think that was the focus of what we were doing here. And that's why it has a strong equity lens attached to it, in that, the access to genuine, authentic learning won't be the bailiwick of a few. Okay, it will be the bailiwick of each and every child in North Colony. And I think that's the predicated premise, if you will, on which we have built these spaces. So I'm excited as a result of that.
Trish, was there anything else? Okay. Do we have any other questions from our committee?
Hi, it's Paula again. I have another question. So if one teacher covers 4 areas, there's 5 rooms, correct? And one teacher is doing 4 rooms. So if a student wants to do a drop-in, and there's only one teacher, who covers the other 3 rooms for a student to drop into?
No, there's a teacher for each of the spaces. So there is a teacher whose day is in the makerspace room. There's a teacher whose day is in the humanities room.
Okay, because it said one FTE. So is the 1 FTE is being split, or it's 1 FTE for each space?
One for each space.
Okay, makes better sense now.
Sorry.
I know, maybe I just read it wrong. Thank you.
Hey, this is Sudhakar Pillai. I have a quick question. Will this space be open for, I know the schedule is going to be a nightmare now to accommodate everybody. The whole point of it is like building the equity for everybody. Everybody should get a chance. That's the essence of this innovative spaces. I totally agree. This is great. I'm really excited as much you guys are. But do you think if the schedule doesn't work out, will you be able to allow people, kids can go in there later in the after schools and stuff like that to make use of this? When the kids get busy, or if we are not able to accommodate to get everybody to get a chance to explore all these spaces, like in some club activities, maybe you can use this as a club thing, but it's a school thing, so.
Absolutely. Something we were talking about, like the Future Cities project that's some of you, I referenced earlier that some of you may have seen the video. We looked at that. We realized like if that were this year, the kids might have used the humanities lab. They might have used the videography lab. They might have used like the maker space. So it may be that kids who get really into it want to come after school. And so do they have opportunities? And will we use those spaces? Absolutely, because I think our whole goal is to generate that passion in kids. And so we'll give them those opportunities. And that's a great idea. Absolutely.
Yep, that's great. Yep, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? And at the bottom of the screen, for those of you that are watching the live stream, you can email your questions to communications@ncolony.org. And that address will show up as we go through the remaining slides. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them over that way.
Mrs. Nardillo and Mr. Vondel, if it's okay, could we move to the next set of slides here?
Certainly.
Okay, so we're going, so with the opening of the middle school and the shifting around, we are going to require some staffing additions. We have our department area supervisors here to talk briefly about each of the requests that will go into that. So we have Mrs. Keogh to begin with a presentation of a 1.0 request for music.
Thank you, Mr. Kaur. I just wanted to let you know that the request for 1.0 in music is largely to address needs in grade 6. In 6th grade, moving to the middle school, we have 6th grade band, probably two sections of 6th grade chorus, probably two sections of 6th grade orchestra, and then mandated general music for all students in grade 6. We have no real heavy amount of staff able to move from the elementary over to the grade 6. For instance, if I looked at Joe Bianchino at Latham Ridge, he only loses 3 hours. I can't spare him to do full days in a middle school model. Our orchestra enrollments have increased largely. They used to be at 472 10 years ago. They're at 698 right now. Our chorus enrollments went from being 75 students in the high school chorus program when I started to now 230, which has held steady for years. And our band enrollments district-wide have gone between 10 students in the last 10 years. Like, they're rock solid steady. So with our new staff, we're going to struggle to deliver the current program. So this will allow us to have the opportunity to have the programs that families are expecting to return to this fall for grade 6 and for all of our program in music. And I'll hand it over now to Mrs. Manzella for art.
Hi, good evening. It's nice to be here with you tonight. Sort of along the same lines, in order to support the enrollment growth that we have and be able to cover all of the 6th and 7th and 8th grade sections, a 0.6 is my best estimation of the staffing that will help us to solve that puzzle as we learn the schedule and we see the sections, and as all those pieces come into place, that is where I think the department is in terms of being able to support our curriculum goals in 6, 7, and 8. At the elementary level, the assignments of those art teachers would remain K-5, and I think they are all very excited to assume some supporting role in the innovation lab and integration of content area curriculum at that level. The increase in the 0.6 would allow us to also sustain our programming and the offerings across our K-12 spectrum. So we do have a very robust and successful program at the secondary level, and we're looking to be able to maintain and continue that with that visual and media arts pathway available to students following grades 6, 7, and 8.
Thank you, Ms. Manzella. Mrs. Nardillo, Mr. Vondel, would you like to just pause here briefly while we have not that they're going away, but while Theo and Ms. Manzella have just presented here, would you like to have questions, or do you want to wait?
We can open it up right now for questions. Does anyone on the board have questions for Ms. Keogh or Ann? How about our budget representatives?
Mrs. Pangburn, I think, has her hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a second to get off mute and to think through my question. In the music program, as we move the sixth graders from the 6 elementary schools up to the middle school, doesn't that free up some time for the music teachers at the elementary? Because doesn't each elementary have one music teacher?
Each elementary building has a full-time general music and chorus teacher. So right now they would be, say, like I use Joe Bianchino at Latham Ridge, has K through 6 general music and then chorus in 2 grade levels. He'll have K through 5 general music. He'll essentially lose 3 hours out of it 6 days. So yes, there's a smidgen of time freed, but it's not even a half day. And travel on each side of that allows me basically an hour and a half to do anything with him, which I can't even cover a class regularly at the 6th grade in a AB or some kind of schedule. But in band and orchestra, there is some staff. That's why I'm not looking, like, if I'm not asking for 3.0, because band, chorus, orchestra, general music for 475 students, there's no way a 1.0 covers any fraction of that. But we do have some staff that is teaching band lessons, grade 6, orchestra lessons, grade 6, and they, right now it's all COVID, everyone's everywhere, but they will definitely be part of that equation, which is why I'm hoping that 1.0 will actually cover everything that it needs.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering with the orchestra and the band teachers that travel for grades 4 and 5 now. Maybe that'll, the capacity at your general music level might make some of that a little easier to manage and support more students who want to do band and orchestra and chorus.
Yeah, we have so many students. So it's my hope that covers everything. I have no idea, honestly, if it does without a schedule and everything in place. But
yeah, start somewhere. Thanks.
Are there any questions before we move on? Okay, I don't see any. So, Joe, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you, Mary. So now we'll go back to the presentation, and we'll talk about middle school staffing additions in the area of English as a new language and in world languages. Mr. Boone will be there to present. I'm sorry for a delayed introduction, Brenna.
No problem at all. Thank you, Mr. Kaur. So for our E&L program, similar to what was just described by Ms. Keogh and Ms. Mandela, we're looking at an increase of enrollment with bringing in 6th grade. So in looking at the 2 school years that I listed there, in the current 2020-2021 school year, we have 54 E&L students. Those are actually the numbers as of the data that I shared with you last week, which are our numbers in the fall, and we've had additional E&L students join us since then. But bringing in the 6th grade would add a grade level, of students, and would increase that number based on the current enrollments in grade 5 to 75 or approximately 75 E&L students in the 6-8 program. So that would amount to approximately a 39% increase. I had shared with the board last week some statistics from the E&L department overall and the immense growth that we have experienced in the past 5 years. We've gone district-wide from about 200, hovering around 200 students in the year 2016 to now close to 400 students in the district. In our E&L program. So again, just to support that growth and to support that group of students moving over, the FTE that would be required would be 1.0. And then the 0.2 that is also depicted here is to support the Bridges program that I had described last week. which is an early literacy program for students at the secondary level. It's a specialized program to help support some of our most vulnerable learners and students. For the World Language Department, also a 1.0 FTE. In the previous school year, there was a resignation at the end of the school year that was not filled as a result of the COVID reconfiguration. So we would hire for that position in the coming school year to return the department to pre-COVID staffing and be able to offer the full 6 through 8 program as it was designed or is being designed for the coming school year.
So you are set there, Ms. Muldoon, correct?
I believe so. Yep. So if you want to go to questions, that's fine.
Great.
Are there any for Brenna from the Board of Education or from our budget committee? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Go. I can't. Anne, do you have a question? Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you, Brenna. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you for the time.
Go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So now we're going to move to requests from career and technical education, and Mr. Phillips will be here to speak to that.
I'm really excited about the addition to the innovation spaces to the middle school, the new middle school, and all the elementary schools. I'm real excited to add hands-on learning in STEM. With the 6th graders coming to the middle school, we've never had CT instruction for them in the past. What we're proposing is that each 6th grader would receive 10 weeks of CT instruction. That would be opposite in a period opposite art and world language. Kind of a note that there is a New York State middle school mandate for 1.5 units at the middle school. Currently, we give our 7th and 8th graders about 30 weeks a year. So we're currently at 1.5. This 1.0 would bring us into compliance and give some really neat experiences to our 6th graders that they never had before.
Mm-hmm. We like to be in compliance.
I think the experience is really more important.
Yes, you're right.
And I'm excited that 6th graders are going to, start, in addition to the innovation spaces, have this new opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Any questions for Mr. Phillips? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And so we'll go to the next middle school staffing request, and that is for the position of middle school dean. That would be a 10-month administrative position. Mr. Chamberlain.
Thanks, Mr. Core. So as we are going into expanding our building square footage wise by almost 60%, adding 475 additional students, families with the associated staff in the building. I think we have amazing teachers and wonderful students. And if we want to keep our quality service for them, service, support, and guidance administratively, I think this would be pretty important. Specifically, we're looking at this position to provide transitional support for 6th grade students. The 6th grade teachers are coming out of smaller elementary buildings. Obviously, this year is a little different, but they're used to having access to someone who is a direct support to them. This would allow that to continue. This person would also, this position could serve as liaison with the elementary principal team to ensure that there is vertical alignment and consistency as students move from 5th into 6th grade. Students will be for the first time seeing extracurricular clubs and activities with the wide diversity that we offer at the middle level. There are certainly some at the elementary level, but they're not as consistent and wide in variety. This person would serve to support that. Also, another key one is serving as an instructional resource for intervention and equity services. those pieces are, I think, cannot be understated right now through this transition. And I think the added support will allow us to be intentional and less reactive to those things. And I think intention, just like we're talking about the innovation labs, intentionally scheduling things, intentionally doing things right now is what we have to do in order to make sure they happen. And this would be adding in another brain to our administrative team to help oversee and make sure things are safe and inclusive for every student in our environment.
Thank you, Davis.
Any questions from Mr. Chamberlain?
No, I would just make the comment that I think this is an important position for the transitional factor alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. Okay. So, Joe, would you like to speak about other staffing additions?
Sure. So we have Mr. Stein with us tonight. Mr. Stein will be speaking to other staffing additions. When we talked about our .6 physical education addition here, this is actually, I think, we didn't want to say it was directly a middle school. We would say it is a sort of a ripple effect of the middle school, but it's not directly attributed to the middle school. So, Mr. Stein.
I think it's going to be me, Joe. It's Dave.
Oh, okay, Dave. Good. Well, it's because it is PE and it's very appropriate. So thank you very much.
No problem. So we currently have a .4 adaptive phys ed teacher who this year was able to actually be a 1.0 as a result of a leave that we had that turned into a full year leave. But when that person returns next year, our .4 adaptive would go back to .4. And what we were able to do this year was to travel Coach Alvarado from the high school where he taught all 7 through 12 to Southgate. And he's been doing a great job with the adaptive students as well as the general ed students at Southgate. But we want to continue to build upon the good work that we've been able to accomplish over the past couple of years in our adaptive program at the high school. We've been working in conjunction with the special education department, the supervisors, the teachers, the support staff, and we've done some really good things with scheduling to make a really positive experience for those students. And this year, I would say it was kind of a positive to come out of COVID was we're able to have all the students, the 7 through 12 students housed at the high school. So they all got the benefit of Coach Alvarado's expertise and working with them. And it's been a very positive thing. And so next year, our goal would be to have him, if we could schedule it such that he could be in all 3 locations, Southgate, the junior high or the middle school and the high school, that would be great. But realistically, at the very least, he would kind of spearhead aligning the curriculum between those 3 settings, as well as the other elementary schools that had the needs, and expand upon what we've been doing at the high school and kind of transfer it over throughout the district. And the other thing we were trying to implement this year prior to COVID is that we were looking to add a unified adaptive program with the high school students, whereas some of the students who had an interest in helping during their physical education period, we did some of this with Coach Cavada 2 years ago, where they would help out, kind of mentor the students, be a little bit of a teacher assistant, so to speak. And the students that participated in it informally had a really good experience. So there is a bit of a more formal program one of the other districts in our area has. And literally the day before we closed last year in March, we had attended a conference and I had started setting up some visitations, and we're going to move forward with it this year. So we're hoping to have this position so we can continue to build upon that and introduce that program more formally for next year. And then also to have this person work as a department liaison with the CSE. That's about it.
Thank you, Dave. That is a great program that you have, the Adaptive Physical Education Program.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Dave? Okay, we'll move on then.
So Jane, could you put up the next slide, please? Thank you. So these are additional staffing requests. Ms. Muldoon requested a 0.3 ENL teacher, and that is there essentially to support district-wide enrollment. We have an additional section, and we also mentioned this, Ms. Skeels mentioned this in the enrollment presentation the previous night. So we have an additional section at Bout Hills. We're going to add a fourth section there. So we're going to need a 1.0 elementary teacher. And we also referenced the fact that we would like to hold 2 teachers in reserve to deal with enrollment, one for kindergarten, the other for grade 6 enrollment. We may not have to use these, but we want to put them in the budget as a place marker just in case. And then the request that was...
Mr. Core, I'm sorry. The other night, I want to clarify, when I presented, I only asked for a 1.0 in reserve for kindergarten. And then as we were doing the presentation, one of the things that became clear, we had shared that the grade 6 class size is scheduled to be 28.75. And I had mentioned that this is the one bubble that's coming through, and they've been in classes of 28, 29 since 4th grade. The one piece that after I presented, I thought about, you saw the big bump of about 90 kids between 8th grade and 9th grade. So some of that is Manans, but some of that is parents deciding from private school to bring kids to our public high school. And something that we had talked about previously and then just sort of lost track of is Dr. McGivens had said a long time ago, we don't know what the bump might actually be now that parents are like, oh, 6th grade is no longer in your elementary, you're starting a middle school. Maybe instead of sending my kid in 9th grade, I'm now going to send them in 6th grade. So if numbers hold and our projections hold, we don't need that 1.0. But in presenting it, we thought back about that, and we don't know what, as we would say, the middle school effect is going to be. And so I know Mr. Hoot would prefer to have it built into the budget and then just not use it if it doesn't materialize rather than having to amend the budget. So I just wanted to clarify that change.
And then on Wednesday night, we outlined the 1.0 Director of Social Emotional Learning with a focus on equity. And this is vital, we feel, to provide oversight at a time when the needs of our students and our staff and our community are more apparent than ever in the area of mental health. Also in terms of equity efforts to make sure that we as a school community are serving each and every child, and that we're attracting candidates that are representative of the diverse backgrounds of our students, and that we also have oversight over our social and emotional learning curriculum, so that every student gains. And you saw that also in our innovation statements. Students gain strategies and learned activities to help them have agency over their own mental health. So these represent our additional staffing requests here. And Mrs. Nardillo, if there are questions, I will, or people on the call will answer them with regard to this. If not, we'll move on.
Okay, do we have any questions?
I have a question. If we're fully using the middle school next year as a middle school, there's no mention of additional custodial staff. Do we need any?
There was additional custodial staff that were put on this year with the pandemic. So we did meet that need, and I think Mr. Hoot, do you want to add anything to that at all?
Mr. Core, excuse me, Mr. Core, you're correct. We did add staff this year in anticipation of opening up the middle school. So at this point in time, we think we are staffed accordingly for next year with a normal operating setting.
And Ron, I think, to add to that, the middle school was used as a school this year. It was 4-6 intermediate school. But with the challenges of cleaning to meet COVID, we more than needed those staff.
All right, thank you.
Could I just add, right now also we have lunch going on in every classroom too. So in addition to only about probably 6 rooms that aren't used because they're storage rooms, the whole building's in use and it's pretty heavily used right now.
Great.
Yes, Mr. Pillay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have a question about the staff request, the one for the mental health and acuity. Will that be prioritized? Because considering this year, post-pandemic, lots of kids are going to come. As you read the news, there are so many people are mentally, ill, and they definitely need help to get back into school, get into the rhythm. I thought that would be a good idea to prioritize that request. I know the other things are definitely needed, but this may be a one you guys can prioritize.
We would absolutely prioritize that. Ms. Skills, I think you mentioned it also in, SED documentation. There was, a lot of documentation, especially in talking very precisely and focused on the return and the recovery, that, attention to mental health and, concerted, focused attention is going to be very critical in that return.
Oh, okay. Yep. I remember that. Yep. Thank you so much. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, it doesn't appear there do not appear to be other questions, so we can go on.
The next area, we'd like to put it into the area of maybe new program here, but movement to a change in our substitute coordination service. Ms. Bongermino.
Thank you, Mr. Kaur. So one of the things that Mr. Kaur has asked us to do is to really look at things that are in our control, and are there ways that we can do things more efficiently and save some money so that we can be able to fund the new positions and new programs. And so in looking in one of the areas of HRs, we currently have a substitute coordination service that we use through BOCES, and we've used them for quite a number of years. And we contract with them and we get BOCES aid on that service. And they're responsible for doing all of the recruitment, onboarding, fingerprinting, and training of new substitute teachers. In addition to that, they provide the absence management piece so that when teachers need to take a day off, they access the BOCES software, and then not only is the absence recorded in BOCES so that we have record of it, but then they also schedule the substitute teacher to come into the building. And so the projected cost for the upcoming school year is about $57,000, and that's net of the BOCES aid. So it's actually a bigger expense, but we do get that reimbursement later. And in really looking at that process and the service that we're getting from BOCES, and while it's working, we feel that we really could do things better. So we've looked at some other software, and currently we are really seriously looking at changing from BOCES to a company called Frontline. They're the software company that we are using for our professional learning management, and also, I believe, IAP Direct. So it's a company that we've used before. We would be able to do this through BOCES, so we would still get the BOCES aid on the software. And basically what would happen is that HR would take over the HR functions as far as hiring new subs. So we would do the recruitment, the onboarding, ensuring the fingerprinting, the training, and really getting our North Colony pool of subs. And that's one of the things that we really were finding with BOCES is that a substitute teacher could go to the BOCES system and they would sign up with North Colony and South Colony and Shen and Guilderland, and then they have their pick of schools when an absence came up. And so we had a lot of cancellations at the last minute, and it was just really hard to get any true bank of North Colony specific sub teachers that wanted to work for us. And so by really taking that under our own umbrella and saying you're now part of the North Colony community and you will have access to the North Colony PD and you will be familiar with our schools and working with our staff and our kids, we would have a much better sense of control over those subs. So we believe, based on our incredible HR department, I'm not going to take credit for that. I'm going to put that out to Kate Shellard and Sarah Sherwin. They're amazing. We believe that we have the capacity to be able to take this role back in-house as far as the HR functionality piece. But the frontline system would take over the electronic piece as far as recording of absences and scheduling of subs. The other piece that's really important is there is a incredible labor-intensive data entry component that we've been kind of saddled with since day one, where information's in the BOCES system, then it goes to the building secretary then takes that data, does data entry, puts it into another Access database, then it goes over to payroll, and then payroll does manual data entry. So by moving to this new system, it integrates into our payroll system, so we potentially can free up a lot of that building secretarial time and potentially some payroll time as well by just really automating this process. We have talked to a number of school districts in the area. There's quite a number of schools that have migrated to this new system and they really like it. There's actually an app now that the subs can use to accept jobs, so it's not just answering the telephone. So we're really pretty excited about it. We haven't finalized anything yet, but we're really thinking this might be the way to go. And by doing that, the projected cost would be about $13,850. So just by going to a different system, yes, bringing some things in-house, we have this projected savings of about $43,000. So this is not set in stone yet, but we did want to let you know that we are looking at ways internally where we can look at our current systems and find ways to save money so that we can support new programs and new staffing. Thank you, Mr. Poor.
Thank you, Jenna. Any questions?
So this can all be done with the current staff that we have in the HR department. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
I have a question, Mrs. Martellillo. Does this, if we're going, I think it's certainly a good idea. If we want to make these substitutes North Colony specific, we would want to make North Colony certainly as attractive as we could. Will this affect their per diem rate?
It's a great question, and I would say no. We changed the per diem rate at least for our permanent subs last year. We're competitive as far as the other subs in the area. So we've been trying to monitoring and making sure that we are competitive as far as salary is concerned. So I don't believe, other than like a normal adjustment for the part-time wage scale, I don't believe that we're going to look to adjust the per diem.
Okay. I just didn't know how competitive we were. And so I could see where that would not be an issue then. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sorry.
Oh, yes, Mr. Am I saying your last name right? Pillay?
Oh, sorry that I didn't take the hand away.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Yep.
Are there questions for Ms. Bongermino?
I have a quick question.
Absolutely, Mary, go right ahead.
Yeah, on the slide, there's a bullet that says improved electronic interface for substitutes. Does that, from the presentation, it sounds like it has more to do with the processing of the substitutes, I guess, being used at the school. But I was just wondering, is there any improvements achieved there based on when there's a hybrid model and we go into digital learning? Is there anything there that improves like substitutes on, you know, in that digital space, right? So when there's kids who are not in the physical school building, the policies around substitutes in that digital platform, is there any relationship here? Does it help that situation?
So it's a very interesting question. We have not had any conversation about that. We were looking more as far as how would the substitute access knowing that there's a job, and then how would that information flow over into the district so that we would know who is coming into the building and who they're subbing in for. So certainly that's something we could look at once we know if we're going to go with that software.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mary.
Yes, Sam, go ahead.
Hiring people is not a small task. Do we anticipate being able to leverage any of the work that will be done hiring substitutes to then make it easier to move those individuals into full-time teaching positions when the openings are available, or vice versa? If we have somebody who's looking to step back from full-time teaching into our substitute pool, do we anticipate enough gain from that to cover the additional amount of time it will take to hire the necessary substitute teachers?
Mr. Johnson, that's a great question. So we currently have a large pool of subs through BOCES that are actually our employees. So we're going to be working with them to say, you know, come stay with us, and these are the additional benefits that we can offer you. Kind of like when we did with the teacher force, where we opened up PD to them. So there's that. And then there's always when we do a big hiring committee, there's always extra, you know, people that were not quite the person we're hiring for this position, but hey, come in and be a sub, and that's the way you get your foot in the door at North Colony. So based on all of that and our model of really increasing the number of permanent subs in the building, I do believe that we have the capacity to be able to support the hiring of these substitute teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Mary, go right ahead.
I just had one other question. What you said there just interested me about the pool, like the offerings for the substitutes. Is there a downside as a substitute? So like if I'm a substitute, I don't have a full-time job, maybe the BOCES model might be more attractive because I have more opportunity to fill my time and my hours. Is there a downside on that level?
So it's kind of, it depends on the person. Some people like going with the BOCES model because then they have access to all of these different buildings, all these different schools, and they get to kind of get their toe in the water in all of these different places. But there's a real benefit to being at one school district, because then the principals know you, the supervisors know you, you know the kids, you know the culture, and then truly the people we look to when we have short-term leaves are our permanent subs. So they're like our first go-to. So if you can get your foot in the door and you become an established person with us, that's really the stepping stone to potentially getting a full-time job with us. And that's really where we're seeing people, that's what they want. We are an employer of choice. So if they can get in the door, they really want to be here and they want to stay. So we just want to make it as attractive as possible.
So Jenna, do we have people that were at one time full-time subs that are now our full-time employees?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because
that
makes sense.
Being a support teacher, permanent sub. I believe we talked about somebody potentially today, but with tenure, that was somebody that came through that rank. So we definitely have that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions before we move on? Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kaur?
Just before we go, Julia, do we have anything in the that has been submitted to us from to the communications@ncolony.org?
No, we don't, Mr. Kaur.
Thank you very much. So you can see our budget meeting schedule here. We will meet 2 weeks from tonight on April 12th, 2021. At that time, we're going to have very important information. And so we can present a finalized budget for review. We'll have our updated tax cap, our property tax report card. And when we have that updated budget for review, we'll approve the different schedules for equipment, for staffing, for each of the components of the budget. Of course, there's one very vital piece of information that we are lacking right now. Certainly, we know state aid that was proposed in the governor's executive budget, but being a system of checks and balances and separation of powers here within the state of New York, the final budget is resolved through negotiations between both houses of the New York State Legislature and the executive branch. So the due date for our budget is Thursday, April 1st. We hope for and perhaps anticipate an on-time budget. And when we get the final numbers for state aid and state revenue, that will be extremely helpful to us all in finalizing this process. We did have a 50 viewers on the live stream tonight. I think that's probably an all-time record for us. And for that, I'm very pleased to see our community so involved in the budget process. And I do believe from our internal community who had access to the live stream tonight, we had almost 50. We had 49 individuals. So when you have 100 people attending a budget meeting, that's a great number.
And it was great information, and I'm glad so many people were able to hear the presentation tonight. So again, that address is on the screen. If there's questions about any of the items that we've discussed during our budget deliberations, feel free to send your questions in and we'll get to them on our next meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? So I will turn it back to you, Mrs. Harrison.
Thank you, Mrs. Nardolillo and Mr. Rondell. Thank you, Ms. Skills, and thank you to all the presenters. It was great information. Everyone did a great job. Thanks to the community budget participants and our virtual participants. We look forward to seeing everyone on April 12th. And I will take a motion to leave budget and adjourn. Mr. Cannon, and I'll take a second. Mrs. Pangburn, and all in favor? All right. Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yes. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.